There will never be another Shohei Ohtani. But if there were to be, he'll come from Japan or somewhere else in Asia. But why is that? And why hasn't there been one before? After all, in youth baseball, the best hitter on the team is usually the pitcher. And there have been cases where players have been drafted as a pitcher but then made it to the majors as a hitter, like Rick Ankiel and Shin-Soo Choo. There are also many pitchers who have been respectable hitters, like Madison Bumgarner, who topped a 720 OPS in 3 different seasons. Zach Greinke topped 880 twice and 780 3 times, and sports a pretty respectable career batting average of 225 in 600 plate appearances. Not bad for a weirdo. Did you know 2024 Rookie of the Year and first overall draft pick Paul Skeens was a catcher in college who would close games on the mound before he transitioned to pitching full-time at LSU? Why doesn't he hit or catch in the majors? I could go on and on with an endless list of recent draft picks who were selected as two-way stars, like Jack Caglione of the Royals, Bryce Eldridge of the Giants, both Carson Bench and Nolan McLean of the New York Mets. But none of these guys will ever be like Shohei Ohtani. But why? Let's first get into why these guys and no one else will ever become a two-way player in the majors, and then I'll explain how Shohei Ohtani did it, and why the next two-way player will also come out of Asia. There are several reasons why it's so difficult to succeed in the major leagues as both a hitter and a pitcher. Let's start with the most obvious one. It simply is really that rare for someone to be that talented with both skill sets in both the arts of hitting and pitching. Usually it requires an ideal height and physique to generate 100-mile-per-hour velocity on pitches and 115-mile-per-hour exit velocity on hits. Shohei Ohtani's height at 6'3" and weight at 210 pounds is almost ideal, and his training of fundamentals at a young age, along with his natural abilities, have merged to give him a shot at what he has actually accomplished. Many athletes still fill those stipulations, though, so what really sets Shohei Ohtani apart? The next barrier is how badly do you want to become a two-way player? Would you risk never being a major league player at all? Coming out of high school, Ohtani was highly scouted by the Yankees, Red Sox, Rangers, and of course the Dodgers, who were the frontrunners to sign him with their international pool money. Ohtani actually originally announced that he would go straight to Major League Baseball out of high school, but then he changed his mind after the Dodgers told him he wouldn't be allowed to play both ways. That was the single biggest reason an 18-year-old Shohei Ohtani turned down a multi-million-dollar major league contract. Think about that for a moment. An 18-year-old kid turns down a multi-million-dollar contract to sign with not just any baseball team, but either the Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, or the Rangers, just so he can play both ways instead in Japan. How many 18-year-old kids that really want to play both ways would have the balls to turn down that offer? More are trying to make it both ways these days, especially because Ohtani has already blazed the trail for them. And in a bit, I'll explain why they won't make it both ways. But think about this resolve to see this through, to have your childhood dream right there in front of you, and then to turn it down? That's next level confidence that it's all going to work out in the end. So don't undersell how big of a stand that was for Ohtani, especially when the team has a reason for making you go one way or the other. Major League Baseball teams are in the business of getting the most out of you as a player, whether it be as a hitter or a pitcher. They don't actually care if it's one or the other, or sure, even both. But they do care about the likeliness you have to succeed once they've invested millions of dollars on you. They would certainly prefer you to be a star at one or the other than a guy who just kind of makes it to the majors as one because of trying to make it as both. So most teams will likely be more of an obstacle for players wanting to play both ways rather than an advocate. So, if a player is a rare talent that shows great potential in both, why not try to develop him in both? On rare occasions, these days especially, because of Shohei Ohtani, we're seeing teams being a little bit more open to this idea. But the problem of our third issue comes into play. Rarely do both skills develop at the same pace, both in terms of reaching the ceiling as well as how long it takes to reach maturity, because development is not linear in both pitching and hitting. So imagine this 20-year-old player is in high A and is hitting .355 with 15 home runs in just 70 games. But as a pitcher, his ERA is 6.25 and has more strikeouts than innings, but is also walking way too many batters and clearly isn't ready to be pitching in Double-A. Do you move that player up so his bat can develop against more appropriate competition? Or do you keep him at high A so his pitching can appropriately develop? Or do you ask him to give up pitching altogether and just focus on hitting because that's developing quicker and he's got a much better chance at reaching the major leagues as a hitter? And that's basically what happens. If you're showing all-star potential as a hitter, but your pitching is, let's say, a year or two behind with a much lower ceiling, or even just likeliness for success at all, teams will move you up a level and then have you focus on your hitting. And since they're the ones that own your rights, they have the final say as to what to do with your career. And in most cases, the player will probably agree anyways because they just want to make it to the big leagues as fast as they can anyway. I mean, wouldn't you? So, what was different about Shohei Ohtani? The first and most obvious point is what I already mentioned, his determination to do both. He wanted to do both so much that he turned a direct path to Major League Baseball away, even though that was his original intention over playing in Japan's NPB. But here's why Ohtani was able to develop both as a pitcher and a hitter in Japan to the point that he could be a Major League All-Star in both. Japan only has their top NPB league and essentially one minor league level below them with the Eastern and Western leagues. And while there is a gap in levels between the NPB and their minor leagues, as well as a gap between the NPB and Major League Baseball, it's very different from the gap from Single A and High A straight to Major League Baseball for a high school graduate. Ohtani did indeed struggle in his first season as a pro, spending a small portion of that year in the minors. His batting average that year was just .238 with 3 home runs in 189 at-bats, while his ERA in 60-plus innings was a lackluster 4.23. Not great numbers, although when considering he was about 10 years younger than the league average back in 2013, not bad as well. Here's the thing, though. He was playing in the highest professional league he could beyond the constraints of his contract, so he was content to a certain degree, meaning he was already living his dream by pitching and hitting in one of the leagues he grew up watching as a kid. And just a year later, as a 19-year-old, he would hit .274 with 10 home runs in just 212 at-bats while posting an 11-4 record as a pitcher with a 2.61 ERA and 179 strikeouts in just 155 innings. Pretty significant development. Let's revisit the fact that North American baseball has the Dominican Summer League and complex baseball, usually for teenagers, and then there's low A, high A, double A, and then triple A before, finally, Major League Baseball. Each level has players that essentially belong at that level at that time. The thing about the NPB is that people will say that it's about triple A level baseball. Well, it's actually all of those, there are plenty of NPB veterans that have been ready for Major League Baseball for years. There are a lot of players who are the level of a AAA or AA player. And there are a significant number of teenagers fresh out of high school who would be high A or even only low A players at best in North America. There's a melting pot of talent levels, and once you're in the league, you're developing against all sorts of different levels at every given at-bat. And the final point I'll make here is leverage. Major League Baseball teams have all the leverage when it comes to deciding how to direct your path. They signed you to a contract, and they have the right and leverage to say it's our way or the highway. It wasn't that way with Shohei Ohtani and his Japanese team, the Nippon Ham Fighters. It's a bit of a long story to add to what's already becoming a long explanation, but just trust me when I say that Ohtani had so much leverage on his team that not only would they allow him his wish to play both ways, they did the unthinkable by letting him leave for Major League Baseball before his posting commitment was served. That meant the Ham Fighters got zero compensation from the Angels for Ohtani when he left for Major League Baseball, compared to the $50 million the Oryx Buffaloes received from the Dodgers when they signed Yoshinobu Yamamoto after he did fulfill his posting commitment. And this leverage is becoming the new normal, as you've probably already heard of Roki Sasaki benefiting from Ohtani's precedent as he joined the Dodgers this season on a similar international free agent contract rather than the traditional posting process others have gone through. So now that we're here, now that Ohtani is doing unicorn things and perhaps blazing a trail for others in the future, why won't we see others succeed the way he has? In the North American model, again, the leverage that the teams have on their property and their desire to see a return on the millions of dollars they have invested on these talents, they're going to want to play it safe and force two-way player wannabes to do whatever the player is best at. And it's simply so unlikely that a player will develop at both equally. It's also more likely for said players to get injured if they're both pitching and hitting, and that's another thing teams want to avoid. But surely in Japan, now that Ohtani has done it, he'll have inspired every talented two-way high schooler to want to follow in his footsteps right to the bitter end. And since players in Japan seem to have more leverage than those in North America, surely we'll eventually see so many more players want to give it a shot that we'll eventually have someone succeed, right? Oh, sure. We'll have more people try. We might even have a few reach some level of success in either, or maybe even a lot of success in both. What we'll never see again is someone capable of putting together MVP seasons as a hitter along with Cy Young-worthy seasons as a pitcher from one single person at the major league level. There will never be another Shohei Ohtani.